Weltering heat of South Dallas, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett slams the brakes at a deserted intersection where 11-year-old Lena stands alone behind a lemonade stand, selling hope for 50 cents a cup. What begins as a small act of kindness spirals into a fight for survival. A dying brother 80 miles away, a mother working two jobs, and a little girl doing everything she can to keep her family afloat. Jasmine thought she was just stopping for lemonade. In 3 days, she's pulled into a story that changes everything. Two strangers, one fading summer, and a stand that refuses to give up. And in the process, she changes Lena's life and her own forever. What exactly did Jasmine do to make the impossible happen? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The sun in South Dallas wasn't shining, it was burning, the kind of heat that made the pavement ripple and turned the air into glass. Jasmine Crockett slammed the car door shut with the sharp finality of someone who had just left a battlefield, not a courtroom. The hearing at City Hall had been brutal, 3 hours of bureaucratic stonewalling, veiled threats from political opponents, and a final venom-laced comment from a lobbyist who whispered, "You can't save everyone, Congresswoman." The words still echoed in her mind like poison. Her temples throbbed. Her blouse clung to her back. She was ready to shut the world out, at least for the rest of the day. But then her driver braked, abruptly. At a lonely intersection flanked by shuttered shops and graffiti-tagged fences, something caught her eye. It was a makeshift lemonade stand, small, rickety, almost invisible. A folding table, one leg propped up with bricks, a plastic jug of cloudy yellow liquid, and a sign, handwritten in crooked letters on torn cardboard. 50 cents for hope. Hope, not lemonade, not thirst. Hope. That word hit Jasmine like a fist. Behind the table stood a little girl, maybe 11 years old, maybe younger. Her tattered apron read Lena, in faded thread. Her hair was tied in a puff that had seen better days, and her sneakers were two different brands. But it wasn't her clothes that caught Jasmine's attention. It was her eyes, large, solemn, and filled with a quiet sorrow that seemed to ache for someone, anyone, to notice. Eyes that didn't scream or plead, but gently asked the world to stop just long enough to listen. Jasmine didn't blink. She stepped out of the car. No security, no staff, just instinct. Something was wrong, and she could feel it in her bones. And just like that, the woman who had spent her morning locked in verbal warfare under chandeliers and marble columns now found herself face to face with a different kind of battleground. One without microphones, without cameras, and without anyone paying attention. Except her. Jasmine took a single step forward, and the heat seemed to retreat around her like it recognized something stronger had just arrived. She could feel the sweat clinging to her collarbone, but it was nothing compared to the heaviness coiling in her chest. The little girl behind the table, Lena, stood straight, not from confidence but necessity. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt tucked into faded jeans, her apron stained with lemon pulp and hope. Her hands, tiny and dry at the knuckles, gripped a plastic jug that looked like it had seen more summers than she had birthdays. Jasmine didn't speak at first. She simply observed. The street behind them buzzed with nothing. No cars, no voices, just the occasional dog bark and the low hum of electricity in old power lines. It was the kind of silence that made everything you saw feel louder. Finally, Jasmine broke it. "Can I have 1 cup, please?" she asked softly, placing a crisp $5 bill on the table. Deliberate, slow, like she was placing a bet on a future no one else believed in. Lena's eyes flickered down. She hesitated, not because she didn't want the money, but because she wasn't used to people offering it so freely. She poured the lemonade carefully, every motion precise like she'd done this 100 times, though she barely looked 10. The drink was slightly cloudy, sloshing against cracked plastic cups stacked unevenly beside her. Jasmine accepted it without comment, but her eyes never left Lena's face, watching, not interrogating, waiting for something to appear beneath the stillness. "You know," Jasmine said, crouching a little, her knees creaking in protest, "I think you've got the best curls I've seen all week." Her voice lost its politician's edge, dipping into something gentler. more maternal. Lena blinked. Her shoulders twitched like she'd been tapped from behind. Then, just barely, a smile. Not big, not showy, but real, fragile as soap film. "Thank you," she murmured, looking away but not retreating. Jasmine studied the girl's hair. Thick, coiled, a crown she hadn't been taught to wear. "Don't let anyone convince you to straighten them," Jasmine added. "They're not just beautiful, they're powerful." Lena let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, and nodded. It was the first sign that something in her had loosened. But Jasmine wasn't here for surface victories. She leaned in further, the way someone does when they're trying not to scare off a frightened bird. "So tell me, what made you set this up?" she asked. "This little stand of yours?" Lena didn't flinch, but her face turned blank. Expression erased, and her voice? Flat, automatic. "I just thought it'd be good to do something nice this summer," she said. It was too clean, too perfect. Jasmine had heard better lies come out of Senate hearings, but none that stung like this. Because this wasn't a lie for power. This was a lie to protect something. Jasmine froze in that moment, not from confusion, but anger. Not at Lena, never at her, but at the invisible weight pressing on a child's shoulders until they forget how to answer honestly. At a system that made a girl that young so damn careful. She took another sip of the lemonade, forcing the sour liquid down her throat like it might drown the fury rising in her. "Well," Jasmine said, forcing her voice steady, "you've got something special here, Lena." The girl nodded. Nothing more. And that silence. It said more than a confession ever could. As Jasmine turned to walk back to her car, the afternoon sun seemed hotter, crueler. The world around her hadn't changed, but she had. There was a storm gathering in her chest now. One born not from ego or headlines or re-election campaigns, but from something far more personal. Lena's smile haunted her, that little flicker of light buried under too many layers of silence. Jasmine didn't know exactly what the girl was hiding, but she knew this much. She was coming back. Because something about that lemonade stand wasn't just off, it was wrong. And someone had to pull back the curtain before the world forgot that little girls like Lena were still fighting just to be seen. That night, Jasmine didn't sleep. Not really. Not with the image of Lena's quiet smile lodged in her chest like shrapnel. By morning, she wasn't wondering if she'd return. She was already packing the trunk. The sun was already climbing, ruthless and unbothered, when Jasmine pulled up to the same corner the next day. But this time, she didn't come empty-handed. She popped the trunk and pulled out a wide canvas umbrella, a mesh bag filled with fresh lemons still cool from the market, a sack of ice crinkling like thunder, and a stack of brand-new plastic cups, clean, firm, not warped from heat. As she approached the stand, Lena looked up mid-pour and froze. The girl's eyes widened, not in fear, but confusion, the kind that came from not expecting the world to show up twice. "You came back," she said, more to herself than to Jasmine. "Well," Jasmine replied, hoisting the umbrella into the cracked sidewalk and locking it open in one swift motion, "I figured you could use a little shade. This Texas sun doesn't exactly play fair." Lena blinked, watching as the woman laid out the lemons gently, like they were gifts instead of groceries. Who are you really?" she asked, her voice edged with genuine curiosity this time, not caution. Jasmine glanced over her shoulder and smiled, but there was weight behind it, an old ache that never fully left. "Just someone who had a summer once," she said, "where everything felt too heavy and no one knew it but me." The words landed like a dropped coin, small but undeniable. Lena didn't reply right away, but she didn't look away either. Her hands reached for the lemons, fingers brushing their smooth skin like they were new tools in an old war. Slowly, the invisible wall between them cracked. They sat side by side behind the makeshift table, under the new shade, slicing lemons and pressing them with more rhythm than recipe. It wasn't small talk that filled the silence. It was the absence of fear. Jasmine didn't push. She asked about the best lemonade Lena had ever made, what she thought of mint, how many cups she sold yesterday. Lena answered more now. Not a flood, but no longer just a trickle. Jasmine noticed the way the girl's voice warmed when she spoke about flavors. She also noticed how it flattened when anything brushed too close to home. Every dodge was a scar, every deflection, a wound still healing. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd seen injustice in the Senate and on the streets, but this was something more fragile. A child who had already learned how to protect others by staying silent herself. And in that silence, Jasmine made a decision. Not with words, but with presence. She wasn't just coming back tomorrow. She was staying until that silence broke. The lemonade cooled in its pitcher. The umbrella above them swayed faintly, its canvas creaking in the breeze like an old door, unsure whether to close or open. Somewhere nearby, a siren wailed and faded. A dog barked. But under that patch of borrowed shade, something more private stirred. Not the air, not the sun, but a silence that had grown roots. Jasmine didn't interrupt it. She didn't try to fix it. She simply stayed, still, solid, a quiet witness, until Lena's voice finally broke through the stillness. And when it did, it didn't rise. It lowered like a stone dropped into deep water. "I used to dance," Lena said, so softly Jasmine had to lean in to catch it. Her eyes were locked on the table, not out of shyness, but because the memory itself seemed too heavy to look away from. "Ballet, at the community center on Dixon Street, every Thursday." Her fingers tightened slightly on the rim of the pitcher. "Miss Harper was my teacher. She wore big earrings and clapped offbeat. But she always smiled like you already did something right." The corners of her mouth turned up a little, but it faded fast. "I wasn't the best, but I think I was strong. Miss Harper used to call me the quiet hurricane. Said I didn't talk much, but I danced like I meant it." Her voice dropped lower. "I haven't been back in over 2 months." Jasmine didn't flinch, didn't fill the silence with empty comfort. She just let it breathe. She could see it in Lena's posture, the slight sag in her shoulders, the grip around her cup. This wasn't just about ballet. This was about something lost. "Why'd you stop?" she asked gently. Lena gave a little shrug. "Too quick, too practiced. Things got busy, at home. It's hard to explain." Jasmine nodded slowly. She knew that kind of sentence. It was armor made of air. Looks like nothing, but you can't get past it. "I dropped out of school my senior year," Jasmine said. Calm, matter of fact. "Didn't tell anybody. I just stopped going." She leaned back slightly, eyes still on Lena. "People made up their own stories. Said I was lazy. Said I got in trouble. Said I couldn't keep up." Her voice stayed steady, but there was weight behind every word. "But what really happened was my mom collapsed in the kitchen. Heart failure. 1 second she was making coffee. Next thing, she was on the ground. And just like that, I had to grow up overnight." Jasmine let the truth hang in the air, not to shock, but to show it was safe here. Lena looked up for the first time. Not long, but enough. Enough to see that Jasmine wasn't bluffing, that she wasn't just being nice. She was being real. "Did she get better?" Lena asked. Her voice had lost that cautious edge. Jasmine nodded. "Yeah, it took time, and not just medicine. Took letting people in. Took me admitting I couldn't do it all by myself." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I thought asking for help made me weak, but it turns out pretending I didn't need help. That's what broke me down." Lena didn't answer right away, but she didn't turn away either. Her hand found the handle of the pitcher again, steadying herself like the table was the only solid thing in her world. "I never told my mom I kept going to ballet," she said, barely above a whisper. "She thought I quit months ago. I didn't want her to feel bad. So I just went when I could, walked fast after school, practiced till the janitor kicked me out." Her lips pressed tight. Miss Harper didn't ask questions. She just let me stay late. She needed someone who would stay. And Jasmine did. Without a word, without a gesture. Just her presence. Unchanging, unafraid, unmoving. A promise made not with speeches, but with stillness. When Lena's truth finally surfaced, raw, unpolished, and too heavy for a child her age, Jasmine didn't offer platitudes or promise the stars. She rose to her feet with a quiet fury in her chest and the steel resolve of a woman who had once been the girl left alone with no cavalry. If the system wasn't coming, then she would be the system. That night, Jasmine Crockett didn't sit back and reflect. She mobilized. The moment she stepped into her townhouse, she tore off her blazer, kicked off her heels, and powered on 3 devices at once: her phone, her tablet, her laptop, each becoming a weapon in what she knew now was a race against time. Lena's words echoed in her skull like sirens. Stage 4, 80 miles, gas money. Jasmine had seen reports before. Cases, charts, statistics. But this wasn't data. This was a little girl slicing lemons on a folding table because the world made her believe it was the only option left. No more. Not on her watch. She called her chief of staff before even changing out of her sweat-streaked clothes. I want every free clinic, mobile dialysis unit, and pediatric transport program in a 100-mile radius by midnight. I don't care who's asleep. Wake them up. Her voice wasn't angry. It was surgical, sharp, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Within the hour, folders were dropping into her inbox. Underfunded, overburdened programs barely scraping by. The same story again and again. Not enough vans, not enough staff, not enough will. So Jasmine borrowed some of hers. By 2 a.m., she was cold calling the head of a regional, nonprofit medical shuttle program she remembered from a policy summit 2 years ago. The man sounded groggy. Jasmine didn't care. Listen, she said, pacing her living room barefoot, knuckles white around her phone. I've got a mother working 2 jobs and a kid dying without reliable transport. I need a van. Weekly, starting Friday. Full coverage. No loopholes, no forms. Just keys and commitment. The line went silent. Then came a sigh. You've got one, the man said. I'll push it through. But Jasmine, who's paying for it? Jasmine didn't hesitate. If they can't, I will. But she wasn't finished. The next morning, she tapped into a crisis relief fund in Austin that specialized in critical care support for low-income families. It wasn't publicized. It wasn't flashy. But it worked. She knew one of the board members, an older black woman who remembered Jasmine's earliest fights on the House floor. You calling me means it's serious, the woman said. It's beyond serious, Jasmine replied. It's survival. The fund agreed to fast-track coverage for renal treatments and recurring hospital copays. No bureaucracy, just action. Still, Jasmine wasn't satisfied. She brought in her legislative aide to track down pediatric specialists in Dallas County who owed her favors. Real ones. Not for votes, but for lives. One had a private practice. Another sat on the board of a children's hospital. She laid it out clear. You don't need to sponsor a gala. You need to sponsor her. Quietly, no headlines, no cameras. Just do the right thing. And by hour 46, the blueprint was real. A transport van, reserved weekly. Hospital copays covered through a rotating donor pool. A standby nurse with a private hotline for the family. A backup gas stipend for emergencies. And the most important detail of all, Lena's name had never been spoken outside Jasmine's circle. Because Jasmine didn't want gratitude. She wanted dignity. Lena didn't need to know, not yet, that a quiet army had formed behind her. That the system which once demanded silence had been forced, for once, to listen. Jasmine closed her laptop at the 48-hour mark, her body aching from adrenaline, her hands stiff from typing. But her heart? It was calm, not because the fight was over, but because, for the first time in this child's story, the next move wasn't up to the struggle. It belonged to justice. The machinery of change had already begun to turn quietly behind the scenes. But Jasmine knew that wasn't enough. Justice done in the shadows was still invisible to the people who needed to believe in it. And Lena didn't just deserve support, she deserved to be seen. At exactly 12:07 p.m., Jasmine Crockett pressed Go Live. No lighting setup, no script, no media crew. Just the raw backdrop of sun-bleached pavement, a cracked sidewalk, and Lena's humble lemonade stand, standing like a quiet act of defiance against everything that had tried to keep her invisible. Jasmine faced the camera, her eyes steady, her voice low but unshakable. What you're looking at, she began, isn't a fundraiser. It's not a summer hobby. It's not cute. It's a cry for help dressed up as a child's business. She paused, the silence behind her amplifying every word. This stand exists because a little girl named Lena decided it was her job to keep her family from falling apart. She laid it bare. The hospital trips, the 80-mile drives, the skipped meals, the silence they'd been forced to live in. And if this community, if this country has any conscience left, it will show up. And for once it did. Within 20 minutes, the first car pulled up, then two more, then five. By 1 p.m., the sidewalk that had stood empty for weeks was swarming with life. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years stood shoulder to shoulder in line for lemonade. Mothers wiped sweat from their brows while holding toddlers. Elderly men with walkers leaned on canes to drop folded bills into Lena's tip jar without saying a word. One man whispered, "I don't drink lemonade," then handed over a $100 bill and walked away. It wasn't a transaction, it was reparation. Not for the past, but for what the present had dared to demand of this child. Lena stood behind the table stunned, still, but not frozen. Her hands poured, stirred, smiled, thanked. Over and over. Jasmine watched her closely, noting how her movements were faster now, more confident. Not because she'd changed, but because someone finally saw her. Then out of the crowd, a man in a navy apron and ink-stained hands approached, holding a rolled-up canvas tube. He looked like he'd come straight from his shop, sweat clinging to his collar. "I own a print shop off Jefferson," he said, unrolling the banner as Jasmine stepped forward. "Saw the live stream. Thought this belonged here more than anything I've ever made." The sign stretched wide across the table. Lena's Lemonade. Poured with love. Healing with every drop. The letters were bold, but the font was gentle, like a hug wrapped in typeface. Jasmine helped him fasten it behind the stand using string and thumbtacks someone fished from their glove box. Lena just stood there, staring at her own name, not like she couldn't believe it, but like she was trying to remember if she was allowed to. And then came the color. Late that afternoon, a young man in paint-streaked jeans arrived on a bicycle with a duffel bag strapped across his back. He said nothing at first, just nodded at Jasmine, then pulled out spray cans, brushes, and a battered Bluetooth speaker that hummed softly with jazz. For the next several hours, he transformed the lifeless brick wall behind the stand into something that didn't just catch attention, it demanded reverence. A portrait of Lena, eyes forward, head high, arms extended mid-dance, loomed large across the bricks, framed by halos of citrus and bursts of gold. And beneath it, in handwritten script, he scrawled, "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it sells lemonade." When Lena saw it, she didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just straightened her back. Her chin rose half an inch, and she looked out across the crowd, not as a child in need, but as a center of gravity the neighborhood hadn't realized it was orbiting around. And Jasmine, watching from the edge of the crowd, felt her own throat tighten, not from pity, not from relief, but from something rarer, hope earned. As the final rays of sunlight kissed the edges of the mural and the scent of lemons lingered in the thick evening air, something heavier, more human, moved into the scene. Not painted on brick, not printed on a banner, but walking on worn-out souls in silence. The woman behind it all, the mother. She didn't announce herself. She didn't have to. Her presence settled into the space like gravity. Jasmine saw her before Lena did, a figure on the edge of the sidewalk, still in a bleach-scented uniform, arms folded tight across a chest that had carried too much for too long. She wasn't tall, but there was something immovable about her. Her hair was pulled back under a worn headscarf, and her shoulders were stooped, not from age, but from invisible burdens dragged behind her day after day, mile after mile. As she approached, Jasmine noticed her hands, calloused, cracked, the kind that washed dishes and sorted laundry and gripped steering wheels at 5 a.m. with no one watching. Lena's mother didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She simply stood in front of the woman who had lit the match and set a quiet revolution in motion, and she bowed her head. Jasmine stayed quiet, letting Lena unravel the truth at her own pace. "There was a show coming up," Lena continued. "My first time as lead. Miss Harper even sewed a costume just for me. It had silver stars. I'd never had anything like that before." She stopped, swallowing hard. Then things got tight at home. Bills, medicine. My brother got sick again. I couldn't ask for ride money or class fees. I couldn't even ask for time. She looked down. So I just stopped showing up. And now, I can't even remember all the steps anymore. It's like the whole thing is fading. Jasmine clenched her jaw, not in frustration, but in fury at a world that lets a child choose survival over joy. She leaned forward, slowly placing her hand flat on the table. Close, not touching. Just there. It didn't fade, Lena. It's still there. You danced. You led. That happened, and it mattered. Just because things got hard doesn't erase that. Lena's voice cracked for the first time. But I didn't even get to say goodbye to it. One day I was practicing. The next day I was peeling potatoes for dinner, like nothing ever happened. She gave a half laugh, sharp and bitter. Now I just pretend it was never real. Jasmine's voice cut through the heat. Low, solid. It was real, and the world doesn't get to take it from you just because it got hard. That part of you, that dancer, it's still inside, waiting. And when you're ready, it'll still be there. The space between them didn't feel like shade anymore. It felt like shelter. Lena's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, her fingers uncurled. The wind brushed past them, and for the first time, silence didn't mean pain. It meant trust. By the third day, the distance between them had thinned, not erased, but softened, like calloused skin learning to feel again. And as the last customer disappeared around the corner and the street fell quiet, Lena didn't look up right away. But Jasmine knew. She could feel it coming, the way a storm announces itself in the stillness, long before the first drop falls. The shadows had stretched across the pavement, long and uneven, when Lena finally spoke. Her voice didn't rise. It lowered, a quiet surrender to something too heavy to carry alone anymore. "My brother's sick," she said, eyes locked on the pitcher in front of her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she refilled the melting ice. Not because of the chill, but because she'd made a decision to stop hiding. "It's his kidneys. Stage 4. They say it's terminal unless he gets treatment, and we don't have time." Jasmine froze, not in surprise, but in reverence. She understood the cost of a truth like that, how long it takes to break open, how much it takes to say it out loud. Lena kept going. The dam had cracked, and now the current was too strong to stop. "The hospital's 80 miles away. We have to take him once a week, sometimes more if his numbers drop. Mama drives the whole way and back. Same day, no matter what." She blinked hard, fighting against tears that had waited too long for permission. "She works 2 jobs. Mornings she cleans houses, nights she folds sheets at the plant. She barely sleeps. She eats crackers and coffee and tells me she's fine." Lena's jaw clenched. "She's not fine." Jasmine didn't move, didn't even breathe loud. This wasn't a story. It was a confession carved into survival. "I started the stand," Lena said, now gripping the edge of the table like it might keep her from falling. "Not for fun, not for pocket money. I thought, if I could just make enough for gas, just 1 tank a week, maybe she could rest. Maybe she wouldn't have to skip dinner or lie to me about not being hungry." Her voice broke then, not into sobs, but into stillness. The kind of break that doesn't come with noise, only with exhaustion. "I thought I could help." She looked up finally, and what Jasmine saw in her eyes was worse than sadness. It was shame. Shame that she hadn't done more. Shame that she had to do anything at all. "People think it's cute," Lena whispered. "They stop, smile, toss $1 in the jar like they just saved the world. But no one asks. No one really sees me. I'm not here to be cute. I'm here because everything's falling apart and I don't know what else to do." She paused, then added, "I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not my teacher. Mama said if people knew, they'd treat us different. That kind of help? That kind leaves bruises you can't see." Jasmine felt a slow, sharp burn rise behind her eyes. Not from pity, from fury. Fury at the quiet cruelty of the system, at the fact that a child had to carry the weight of 2 jobs and a failing healthcare system on her shoulders, that her answer to crisis was lemonade because no one gave her anything stronger to stand on. Jasmine wanted to scream, wanted to rip the sky open and demand justice. But she didn't, because Lena didn't need noise. Not low, not submissive, just enough. Enough to say, I'm grateful. I'm afraid. I'm still learning how to receive. I didn't expect all this, she said quietly, her voice sandpapered raw from too many nights whispering, it'll be okay when it wasn't. She didn't tell me. I didn't know how bad it looked from the outside. Jasmine stepped forward, slow and measured, like she was approaching something sacred. You didn't fail, she said, voice low but unshakable. You did what mothers do when the world closes in. You held the line. Lena's mother looked up then, just briefly, and in her eyes was the storm of it all. Guilt, pride, fear, exhaustion, defiance. I didn't want people feeling sorry for us, she said, almost ashamed. I didn't want her growing up thinking she needed pity to get by. Jasmine shook her head slowly, every word sharp and clear. This isn't pity. This is power. The kind you deserve. The kind you've earned 10 times over. She hesitated, then added softer but no less firm. Being strong doesn't mean carrying it all by yourself. It means knowing when to say, I can't do this alone anymore. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. For a moment, there was nothing but the hum of a passing car and the faint splash of ice in a pitcher behind them. Lena's mother finally let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her fingers twitched at her sides, wanting to fix something, clean something, do something, because stillness, for her, had never been safe. But Jasmine just stood there, unflinching, not offering charity, offering solidarity. And without a single grand gesture, something passed between them. Two women, two timelines of the same war, meeting at the point where survival and sisterhood overlap. No headlines, no saviors, just recognition, just enough. Just the beginning of no longer being alone. That shared moment between Jasmine and Lena's mother didn't need applause or cameras. It cracked something open deeper than pride. And in the 6 weeks that followed, the impact of that unspoken alliance rippled through the streets of South Dallas, turning one girl's lemonade stand into something no one could have predicted. A movement. The change didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started in quiet ways, in the way people crossed the street differently, no longer just to buy lemonade, but to belong to something. The old man who used to walk past without looking now brought folding chairs and sat under the mural every afternoon, tipping his hat to Lena like she ran a city block. The woman from the print shop returned each Sunday with a box of donated supplies, cups, napkins, and every now and then, cookies wrapped in foil. One high schooler showed up with a Bluetooth speaker and played soft jazz in the background, just because Lena once mentioned she liked the way it made the sidewalk feel expensive. And slowly, the community began to orbit around that corner, not out of novelty, but out of necessity. Something sacred had been planted in the cracks of that pavement, and everyone could feel it. This wasn't just a lemonade stand anymore. It was proof. Proof that even in a system rigged to make the strong crawl and the vulnerable disappear, resistance could come in the form of a plastic pitcher and a child's steady hands. Jasmine watched all of it unfold, not as a savior, but as a witness. She didn't stand behind the table. She stood beside it when needed, then faded into the crowd when not. She knew the most powerful thing she could do now was protect the space, not dominate it. By week 3, someone had set up a chalkboard easel with the words "Today's Purpose" written in colorful block letters. Lena would change the phrase every morning before the first customer arrived. Today we buy gas for healing. Today we thank Mama. Today we breathe. Customers began writing messages underneath, short, urgent, honest things that had nowhere else to live. Miss you, Marcus. God gave me another chance. Still sober, still fighting. The wall beside the mural became a living journal, smudged with fingerprints and rain, but alive. Jasmine read every word. Behind the scenes, the medical plan that Jasmine had set in motion was moving forward, swiftly, quietly, efficiently. Each Friday, just after dawn, a white van pulled up to Lena's apartment complex. The driver, a retired EMT named George, greeted the family with a thermos of coffee and a gentle smile. He wasn't just transporting Lena's brother, he was guarding hope. The route was long but smooth, and for the first time in months, the boy arrived at the hospital with regular vitals instead of emergency spikes. Jasmine kept tabs on everything. She called the clinic weekly. She met with the foundation's representative twice a month. She reviewed reports and flagged anything even slightly delayed. This wasn't charity, it was justice work disguised as logistics. And she knew better than anyone that all it took was one dropped ball for a fragile life to fall back into chaos. By week 4, the doctors gave the first real update. The boy was stabilizing, still sick, still fragile, but his numbers were holding. His color had returned. He was sleeping through the night again. It wasn't a miracle. It was access, something that should have been there all along but never was, until a little girl built a business out of desperation and a woman with power decided enough was enough. But not everyone celebrated. One afternoon, a man in a pressed shirt and sunglasses stepped out of a black car and asked to speak to Lena's mother. He was from the county housing office. There had been a complaint, he said, something about zoning, about commercial use of public sidewalk space, about liability. Jasmine, who happened to be on site at the time, stepped forward with fire in her spine and a stack of legal papers in her hand. "She's not running a business," she said, her voice low and lethal. "She's running a miracle. And if your office wants to file paperwork to stop that, I'll make sure your name is on the front page of every major outlet in the state." The man didn't say another word. He left. That night, Lena asked Jasmine, "Why do people still want to shut us down?" Jasmine didn't lie. "Because power doesn't like being embarrassed. And what you've done here, you've embarrassed a lot of people who never showed up." Lena thought about that for a long time. Then quietly she nodded. Good. By week 5, Lena's stand had become a kind of town square. There were movie nights projected on the side of the building. There were community board meetings that spilled into the sidewalk. There were kids who brought sketchbooks and grown men who sat in lawn chairs for hours because the world felt just a little less cruel near that mural. And still, through all of it, Lena never stopped pouring. She poured when her hands were tired. She poured when her brother was sleeping in the van between treatments. She poured when someone asked her for change, and she gave them the whole cup instead. Because what she was pouring was never just lemonade. It was resistance. It was family. It was the right to stay standing. And then came the 6th week, a quiet Friday. No live streams, no new murals. Just a line of regulars and the rustle of wind through the chalkboard notes. Jasmine was sitting at the far corner, sipping a warm cup, when George, her EMT driver, walked up with a rare grin. "Got the full report," he said. "Docs say the boy's kidneys are holding. They're talking about next steps. Real ones. Not just symptom control." Jasmine looked at Lena, who was busy tying her apron, and felt a deep, seismic shift roll through her chest. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. For the first time, the horizon didn't look like a wall. It looked like possibility. And the lemonade stand that once stood as a symbol of struggle, it was now a monument to survival. The lemonade stand had become a monument. The boy's health had stabilized, and the neighborhood no longer walked past Lena. They stood with her. But Jasmine knew there was still one thing left undone, one chapter of Lena's soul that hadn't yet been rewritten. And when the envelope came, creased, hand-delivered, stamped with gold foil, Jasmine read the words and knew immediately. This was the moment Lena would finally dance again. It started with a letter. Folded into thirds, sealed in a pale blue envelope, and delivered by hand to Lena's mother one breezy morning. The letterhead read, "South Dallas School for the Arts," and beneath it, just 5 words that changed everything. "Full scholarship, ballet program reinstatement." Lena had stared at it like it was written in another language. "They picked me?" she'd whispered, afraid to breathe. Her mother, who had never cried in public, stood frozen in the doorway, one hand over her mouth. Jasmine watched it unfold from the sidewalk, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding the fire in her eyes. She had pulled every string, every quiet favor, every ounce of political capital to make it happen. Not because Lena needed help, but because the world owed her back pay in grace. The first week of classes, Lena barely spoke. She slipped into the back row, practiced in silence, and left before applause could find her. But the muscle memory came back faster than even the instructors expected. Her lines sharpened, her balance returned. Her movements lost their hesitation and grew teeth. What she lacked in showmanship, she carried tenfold in conviction. This wasn't performance, it was testimony. And when the end of term showcase was announced, open to the public, featuring select soloists, Lena's name was at the top of the casting sheet. Jasmine arrived an hour early on the night of the performance, dressed in understated black with her hair pulled into a tight bun. No press, no entourage, just her and a folded program clutched between her hands. The auditorium was packed. The crowd buzzed with chatter, clapping along as other children took their turns on stage. Jasmine sat still, unmoved, waiting for one name, waiting for the moment this city would finally see what it had almost let slip through its fingers. Then the lights dimmed. The MC's voice echoed, "And now a solo piece, still standing," performed by Lena James. The room fell quiet, not tense, not skeptical, just still, as if it knew something sacred was about to step out from behind the curtain. And then she appeared. Lena stepped into the light wearing a simple sky blue leotard. No glitter, no crown. Her hair was pulled back into a bun. Her posture was poised, unshaking. The music began, soft strings building slow tension, like a heartbeat underwater. Lena raised her arms and began to move. Not twirl, move. Each motion cut through the air with purpose, as if her body had waited all year to finally tell the truth. Her legs stretched long and deliberate. Her toes kissed the floor. Her arms swung like they remembered every burden they had carried. Gas money, empty fridges, long car rides to dialysis centers. She didn't smile. She didn't pretend. She just danced like the world had tried to silence her, and she was answering back with every pirouette. The auditorium was silent. No rustling, no murmurs, just witnessing. Jasmine's breath caught halfway through the performance. Not because Lena was technically perfect, she wasn't, but because every movement was a rebellion against the injustice that nearly consumed her. This wasn't ballet. This was resistance in motion. And Jasmine, who had battled lobbyists, courtrooms, and closed-door politics, now found herself fighting something else entirely. Tears that wouldn't wait for permission. Her hand rose instinctively to her mouth. Her eyes blurred, but she didn't blink them back, because this was what she had fought for. Not headlines, not speeches, not thank yous, a stage, a spotlight. A child who once poured lemonade under 100-degree heat now taking up space with grace and fire. And in the final stretch, when Lena leapt into a turn and landed strong on both feet, arms outstretched as if catching the weight of every person who ever told her she couldn't, Jasmine cried, quietly, openly, without shame, because injustice had pushed this girl to the edge. And Lena didn't fall. She danced. Lena's final turn on stage hadn't just brought the crowd to its feet. It had stirred something older, deeper, something South Dallas had forgotten it even possessed. When the curtain closed and the theater lights dimmed, applause didn't end the moment. It ignited it. The echo carried beyond the stage, past the velvet seats and creaking floorboards, out into the cracked streets and flickering porch lights. An unspoken vow that things wouldn't go back to the way they were. 6 weeks later, the stand wasn't just a lemonade cart. It was a landmark of resilience. What had once been a small, rickety table, propped up on uneven bricks, was now sheltered beneath a custom-built awning, painted a bold sky blue with handprints from over a dozen neighborhood kids scattered across the trim like confetti. A planter of marigolds lined the legs, courtesy of Miss Ruth down the street, who said, "Flowers are proof something broken can still bloom." Lena no longer worked the booth alone, not because she didn't want to, but because the line had grown too long, too fast. Folks came not just for the lemonade, but for what it meant. The high school janitor came by each morning before sunrise just to help prep the ice bins. A retired chef from a nearby diner started donating syrups, lavender, ginger, honey pear, claiming, "If you're going to heal people, You might as well do it with flavor. There was even a rotation board now. Volunteers signed up for shifts like it was a neighborhood honor. Veterans, teenagers, grandmothers with aching backs, and grandfathers with old army ball caps. They didn't come for recognition. They came for Lena, for her brother, for themselves. And always beside the tip jar was a second jar, labeled in bold black marker, "Next Lena." It wasn't charity anymore. It was succession planning for hope. That corner became a lifeline. When a neighbor's electricity got shut off, the jar covered the bill. When a mother lost her job, the stand printed out resumes. When a middle schooler confessed he couldn't afford lunch anymore, Lena handed him a drink and whispered, "You don't owe me anything but a promise. Pay it forward." The wall behind the stand, once gray and blistered, was now a mural that spanned 30 feet across. It showed Lena in silhouette, one hand offering a cup of lemonade, the other reaching back to lift someone else. The words beneath it weren't from a poet or politician. They were something Lena had said once, offhand, when she thought no one was listening. You don't have to be big to do something big. Jasmine Crockett didn't hover. She didn't need to. Most days she parked quietly at the gas station across the street, leaned against her car, and just watched. Not with ownership, with reverence. She knew she had sparked something, but it had been Lena who built the fire and the community who fanned the flame. Occasionally, someone recognized her and asked why she wasn't standing center stage. Her answer was always the same. "This isn't my victory to hold. I just reminded them they had power they forgot they were allowed to use." When a local news crew showed up, hoping to catch a feel-good soundbite, Jasmine declined the mic. She pointed toward the stand and said, "You want a story? It's right there. Told in sweat, laughter, and lemon juice." And the community showed up like never before. A local carpenter built a bench beside the stand for the elderly to rest. A youth pastor organized free tutoring sessions beside the mural. Someone from the mayor's office even stopped by, dropped a crisp 100 into the jar and said, "Don't put my name on anything, just don't stop." But the moment that seared into Jasmine's memory didn't come with fanfare. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the air thick with heat and slow cicada hums. Lena wasn't at the booth that day. She was home, helping her brother with a new dialysis routine. Jasmine had come by anyway, like she always did, to check on things. As she approached, she saw something different. A woman in her 30s was manning the booth. Soft eyes, tired hands, and a hesitation that said this was her first shift. When Jasmine neared, the woman looked up, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, I'm new," Lena said. "Said I could help." Jasmine didn't answer right away. She just smiled. Not the polished congressional smile, the real one, fractured and grateful. Then she said, "You're not new. You're just next." That was the quiet legacy Lena had created. Not a charity, not a gesture. A movement rooted in something so heartbreakingly simple, most people missed its power. That kindness is contagious, and that community isn't built by speeches. It's built by standing still long enough to care. Later that evening, Jasmine stood at the edge of the lot, hands in her pockets, watching a new family arrive with 2 kids and a jug of homemade lemonade. They asked if they could take a shift next week. No one had to approve it. The neighborhood already had. A teenager skateboarded by, nodding at Jasmine. "Hey," he called out, "we're thinking of turning that old lot on 8th into a garden. You in?" Jasmine smiled, her eyes stinging a little. "Always." As the sky darkened into rose and rust, she whispered, to no one and to everyone, "I didn't change Lena's life. Lena changed ours. She didn't just raise money. She raised a mirror and showed us we're still good." As the sun dipped behind the rooftops of South Dallas and the last customer left with a smile and a paper cup, the corner fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't lonely. It was whole. And in that silence beneath the mural, beneath the lights, beneath the laughter now stitched into the sidewalk cracks, a question echoed through the stillness. What did all of this really mean? It would have been easy to mistake this story for a happy accident. A child with a sick brother, a congresswoman with a conscience, a neighborhood desperate for a reason to come alive again. But if you look closely, If you peeled back the paint and the press releases, you'd see something more unsettling, more urgent. This wasn't a miracle. This was a response to a broken contract, a country that promised every child the right to dream and instead handed them bills, silence, and a smile that says, hang in there. Lena didn't sell lemonade because it was cute. She sold it because her family was sinking, because the cost of her brother's survival was measured in gallons of gas, long hospital waits, and quiet sacrifices no child should ever have to calculate. That is the lesson no one wanted to say out loud. Lena never should have had to be the hero. In a just world, there would have been no stand, no mural, no jar marked next Lena. In a just world, children dance because they love to, not because they're trying to fund their brother's dialysis one cup at a time. And yet, in a world that failed to be just, Lena built justice with her own hands. And that is the story. Not that goodness still exists, but that it had to be fought for by a girl who should have been dancing in pink tights, not pouring lemonade in 100-degree heat. Jasmine Crockett knew this lesson too well. She had risen from poverty, clawed her way through courtrooms, stood in chambers where her voice echoed against walls built to ignore it. She had seen what happens when systems fail quietly, when kids fall through cracks so wide they look like sidewalks. But watching Lena, Jasmine realized something deeper. We don't just lose children to violence or illness. We lose them to burdens too heavy for their age. We lose them to the expectation that they must be resilient before they have even been allowed to be children. And yet, that's where the second lesson lies. Not in the tragedy, but in the resistance. Lena's story is a defiant reminder that kindness is not soft. It is not passive. It is rebellion with a gentle voice. Every cup she poured was an act of civil disobedience against a world that tried to make her invisible. Every smile she gave was a refusal to sink. And every person who joined her, whether with money, music, marigolds, or muscle, was relearning what it means to be part of something bigger than survival. That is the human truth most often lost in political debates and data reports. Systems don't change when policy shifts. They change when people do. One person chooses to stop their car. One person decides to stay. One person, even a child, chooses not to let silence win. And the chain reaction begins. In Lena's corner, South Dallas redefined what it meant to fight back. They didn't march. They didn't shout. They showed up daily, with folding chairs, with coins, with cracked hands and bruised pride. And they proved something Jasmine had always suspected, but never dared say aloud on the House floor. Policy cannot save a soul, but community can. Because this wasn't just a redemption arc. It was a reclamation of childhood, of faith, of public space, of hope as a collective right, not a personal luxury. And in that final quiet, after the chalk had been washed from the sidewalk by rain, after the last cup of the day had been poured, after Lena and her brother had gone home to rest, Jasmine stood under the mural and read those words again. You don't have to be big to do something big. She closed her eyes, and she thought of every child still unseen. Every mother hiding her fear behind a grocery store smile. Every neighbor too tired to hope until someone else showed them how. And she whispered, not for anyone to hear, but for the universe to carry. Let this not be the exception. Let this be the blueprint. The lesson in the end is painfully simple. We wait for systems to fix what they were never designed to care about. We look to titles and institutions to solve what only neighbors can heal. But Lena didn't wait. She acted. And because she did, others remembered how. A congresswoman remembered her roots. A city remembered its heart. And a tired, forgotten block of pavement remembered what it meant to be home. That is the human lesson. It begins with one cold drink, one burning heart, and the decision to stay, even when the world tells you to walk away. The story doesn't end with applause. It doesn't fade out with Lena's final pirouette or Jasmine's quiet nod across the street. It lingers. It demands. It burns. And like all stories that matter, it leaves behind something far more dangerous than comfort. It leaves a challenge. Don't mistake what just happened here for a feel-good tale. This was never about lemonade, never about charity. This was about a reckoning, A child stood where the system failed. A congresswoman stopped when everyone else kept driving. A neighborhood rose up, not because they had time or money, but because they refused to let another child carry the cost of our collective silence. So if you've made it this far, if your heart is still beating with the rhythm of Lena's defiance, and your throat is still tight from the weight of what she endured, then you already know this can't be the end. It has to be the beginning. Because right now, at this very moment, there's another Lena somewhere, on another corner, in another city. She's got a cardboard sign. She's got cracked sneakers. She's got dreams she's afraid to speak aloud because the world has told her, again and again, that survival matters more than joy. Maybe she's babysitting 3 siblings while her mom works double shifts. Maybe she's pretending to be okay in math class while her brother sleeps through chemo. You just haven't seen her yet. And maybe, just maybe, you're the one who's supposed to. So ask yourself, where will I be in the next Lena's story? Will I be the one who looks away, or the one who leans in, no matter how uncomfortable it gets? The world doesn't need more people who care silently. It needs voices that crack from screaming truth. It needs backs that bend to lift. It needs hearts wide enough to shelter someone else's storm. Let's stop waiting for permission to act. Let's stop asking for the perfect program, the right policy, the green light from a broken bureaucracy. Because the most radical thing you can do today is care louder. Interrupt the narrative. Refuse to let resilience be the only option for those with the least. Be the pause that lets someone breathe. Be the detour that saves a life. Here's what you can do. Today, now, right where you are. Look, truly look. Pay attention to who's being left behind on your street, in your school, in your church. Listen, when someone says they're struggling, don't explain it away. Don't rush to fix. Sit in it with them. Act. Not big, not flashy. Real. Buy groceries. Give a ride. Share a platform. Offer a job lead. Tell your city council what matters. Start with one. Organize. Invite neighbors. Build networks of help. Plant gardens. Trade childcare. Create safety where none existed. Uplift. Celebrate stories like Lena's. Not as miracles, but as blueprints for community-based rebellion. Defend. When the next child speaks, don't let their voice echo alone. Stand beside them. Back them up. Give their courage a megaphone. Because Lena didn't ask to be brave. She just was. And bravery like that shouldn't exist in a vacuum. It should spark revolutions in those who witness it. You don't need a nonprofit. You don't need a title. What you need is already in you. The willingness to not let injustice pass you by unchallenged. That's what Jasmine did. Not with sweeping legislation or grand speeches, but with one decision: to stop the car, to kneel beside a little girl, to listen. And look what came of it. A boy got treatment, a girl danced again, a city remembered its soul. Now the baton passes to you, because the truth is, the system didn't change. Not yet, but the people did. And that's where all true change begins. Not from the top, but from the street corners, the lemonade stands, the whispered prayers no one was supposed to hear. So let this story crawl into your bones and refuse to leave. Let it haunt you, not with sorrow, but with potential. Let Lena's stand become a symbol not of charity, but of shared accountability. Because the moment you decide this isn't just her story, but ours, that's the moment everything starts to shift. This isn't about saving the world. It's about refusing to let it harden into something we can no longer live with. One corner at a time, one kid at a time, one truth told, one silence broken, one hand held a little longer than yesterday. You don't have to change everything, just don't change the subject. Start now. Be the person who doesn't look away. Be the one who remembers that every lemonade stand is a frontline outpost in the war against apathy. And when someone asks you, what did you do when you saw it? Let your answer burn like Lena's final dance. I stayed, I stood up, and I poured love with both hands. This is your moment. This is your street. This is your stand. But if there's one final truth to carry with you, it's this: you are not small. The world will try to convince you otherwise. It will bury you in headlines, numb you with statistics, and wear down your spirit until you believe the lie, that nothing you do can matter, that the problems are too big, too complex, too far gone. But Lena didn't wait for perfect conditions. She didn't wait to be older, wiser, richer, or safer. She acted with what she had: a folding table, a pitcher, and love so fierce it defied logic. That's not weakness. That's not luck. That is power in its purest form, the kind that multiplies when shared. So if you're still hesitating, ask yourself, what am I waiting for? Permission? Resources? Recognition? Because here's the truth. You don't need a revolution to start a ripple. You don't need a camera crew to change someone's day. You just need the courage to care when no one else does. You need the guts to say, this is unacceptable, and then do one thing to make it less so. That's the world Lena dreamed of when she picked up her brother's burden and poured it into a paper cup. That's the world Jasmine envisioned when she paused her life for a stranger with sad eyes and a handwritten sign. And that's the world we build together, not with speeches or slogans, but with acts that refuse to be forgotten. Let this story mark you. Let it change your route home. Let it make you slower to judge and faster to help. Let it open your eyes wider and your arms wider still. Because we're not just fighting systems, we're fighting indifference. And the only thing stronger than indifference is attention that refuses to look away. So go. Go find the stand no one sees. Go lift the voice no one hears. Go remind someone who's drowning that they are not alone. Not now, not ever again. Because while the world keeps asking, what can one person really do? You'll already know the answer. You'll know because Lena showed you. You'll know because Jasmine showed you. And now you will show the rest, not with perfection, not with applause, but with your presence, your witness, and your action. Because kindness is not passive, compassion is not weak, and love, when poured without condition, can resurrect a community from its knees. So let the mural remind you, let the jar marked next Lena follow you in every choice. Let every hot afternoon, every small voice, every cardboard sign be the beginning of another movement, another life rewritten. The revolution doesn't need to be televised, it just needs to be personal. And it starts with you, today, right here, with whatever you've got. Go make it matter. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.